teachers of Reddit. What is your "this student is so dumb it's scary" story? Back when I was teaching high school, I was giving an exam to my first year students, and one of them stole the key to the exam the second year students were taking. He was not subtle about it either. The whole faker sneeze, go get tissue, pick up a large piece of paper, and think your skinny teenage body can conceal it angle. I should have said something, but the fact that I was so fed up with this sort of crap by that point is one of the reasons I quit teaching high school. Anyway, that's not what made it such a dumb decision. What made it dumb was, when he bombed the exam, he tried to claim that I purposefully misgraded his exam because I hated him, and even got his mother in on it for a parent conference, which means his own mother was front and center for me when I pointed out how his answer form was a perfect match for a test he didn't take. Mom was not happy with him, to say the least, though for the icing on the cake, she did ask that I'll let him retake the real test, and since she honestly seemed to care a lot more than many of the parents I met, and since I did admittedly feel a little guilty for not trying to prevent it in the first place, not that I admitted to that part, as a compromise we let him come after school to retry at a penalty. And in the end, he freaking aced the test. He was normally a C student or so, and if he'd just done that the first time, the weight of the exam probably would bumped him up low. Aesop couldn't have turned it into a better cheaters never prosper fable. So I'm lecturing on population. 15-year-olds 9/10th grade. I tell the students that most likely human population will peak at 10.5 billion. A hand goes up and says, what does peak mean? I'm stunned as well as the class, but he is serious, so I answer. I have another teacher in the room, and when we are alone asked what I had thought when I heard the question. I thought, if your father hadn't peaked, I would have been spared that question. Same kid. Teaching patriarchal and matriarchal society, which has nothing to do with sex/intercourse, but a hand goes up and he asks, so if matriarchal is women and patriarchal is men, then who's in charge of the lesbos? But before I could respond, his friend says, you're a moron. The lesbos take care of the lesbos. My class took a while to recover. On a number of occasions, around 5 or 6, I have had to explain to students that you can still get pregnant, even if you don't orgasm. Apparently, it's an old wives' tale in a bunch of cultures. And when I corrected them, they fought back. I had a little boy, 1st grade, who always got 14 as his answer to every problem no matter what. On the second day of school I sat down to do 3 + 2 with him using counters. We set out a pile of 3 and a pile of 2. I told him to count, and watched in horror as he pushed the counters into a line, and then counted back and forth 3 counting them, until he got to 14. That was the biggest number he knew. He would have just kept going on. Kids ask me, are you from Detroit, or some other city I forget? I said neither. I moved here from Pennsylvania. One girl gasped and asked, do they have slaves there? I'm a flight instructor. Had a student who really wasn't cut out for flying. Before each lesson his job was to do a pre-flight on the airplane and make sure everything was working. One of the items you check during the pre-flight are the flaps. Basically, they are a flap of metal that extends from the aft section of the wing and drops down into the airstream during landings. Well, we fly a Cessna 172 where the wings are on top of the cockpit, above the pilot, and the flaps are situated just behind the door. Without fail, this guy opens the door, moves the switch to deploy the flaps, and turns around to run face first into the flaps he just lowered. It's funny the first, concerning the second time, and expected after the 10th time. Every single lesson. One of my 10th graders said she saw a crime being committed, bike being stolen in neighbor's yard. and she wanted to call 911, but she didn't know the number. I'm not a teacher, but I used to volunteer in my daughter's classrooms when they were in elementary school. One day while I was helping grade papers, it became quite apparent that one little girl had copied from the boy sitting next to her. Not only were the answers the same, she also had written his name on top of her paper. I was a former college recruiter who used to set up a booth at low-income schools to help guide first-generation students into college. Had a high school girl come up to me and tell me she wants to be a gynecologist. So I start talking about which schools have good pre-med programs, the kind of classes she would need to take, broaching the idea of med school. She says, hold up, a gynecologist is a doctor? I say yes. She says, well, I do not want to go to medical school. I just want a job where I can look at vaginas all day. We ended up talking about possibly cosmetology school or esthetician school. Also, she was not kidding. I got many dumb questions like this. When you don't know, you don't know. Told to me by a friend, written in his words. The other day I had a student bite into a bar of deodorant. Just chomped right into it, as if it were a coconut and palm tree scented ice cream bar. This, after making like he was going to lick it, and accidentally getting the taste of the deodorant and his own residual pit sweat. Half a second later he just went whole hog on it, and took a chunk out of it, then spat it out. I didn't know whether to call poison control or the principal. I thought I would be teaching about plate tectonics today. Ended up having to do a lesson on why the earth isn't flat. Oh no, how old are your students? 4th grade. When I was a professor I had a student submit a paper she clearly hadn't written. I called her out on it, and she complained by email to me, and the dean of the school. Her argument was that it was hers, because she had paid *her own money to have it written. I'm a professor grading papers now, and I have a few contenders right here. This one student blatantly plagiarized in his first paper. I mean just cutting and pasting from web pages. He didn't even stale form the primary sources, and they weren't even scholarly web pages. I was so surprised at how badly he plagiarized that I gave him the benefit of the doubt that maybe he didn't understand what it really was. I just gave him a 0 along with an email describing the issue in detail with some additional links for whole sites that do the facts really well. We met, and I explained it to him. He was abjectly apologetic, and explained that he had missed the nuances before. Grading the final paper, same shit all over again. And I test this stuff using a free website I found just on Google, and it takes like 2 minutes to check. What the fuck is he thinking? Also the non-plagiarized part is so poorly written I don't know how he even got in, much less made it to be a junior at a selective school. The guy's is also pre-med, WTF. I've had kids turn in papers that were clearly plagiarized, but one kid didn't bother to change the font color on his paper. It was a pretty clear case. I had another who was supposed to be researching a technological innovation, the history and impacts of it. One kid chose the telephone. His paper was not only obviously plagiarized, but it was literally an ad for telephones.com. The kid had clearly not even bothered to do anything other than just go to telephones.com and copy and paste. But my all-time favorite is the kid who stopped me and said, "Is Chicago a city or a country?" I told him it was a city. He considered that for a minute and then said, "Wait, then what's a state?" I teach 5th grade. I had to explain to a student walking in line. He would never walk in line correctly. Finally, after correcting him for the 1000th time, he snapped. "What do you mean? What do you mean get in line? What's the line? Why do teachers always say that?" It never occurred to me. He didn't understand, after being in school for years. He was the best though. One of my favorites.